My name is Michelle Cipriano, and my parents were first-generation Italian Americans. All four of my grandparents were born in Italy. So I heard Italian being spoken on a regular basis when I was growing up, and I wanted to learn how to speak it. So my father taught me some basic expressions and vocabulary, but I wanted to learn more. Unfortunately, my high school did not offer Italian. My choices were German, Latin, French, and Spanish. So I chose Spanish, figuring it was the closest to Italian. And I liked my classes. I enjoyed conjugating verbs, studying the grammar, translating some poems. But my interest really peaked when we had a substitute teacher who had been a missionary in Central America. And her stories of her time and adventures in several Central American countries were just fascinating. And around the same time, a student came and talked to our class about the opportunity to be a foreign exchange student as he had been. And I thought, wow, this is what I want to do. I'm going to be a foreign exchange student to Central America. So I took the paperwork home to my parents. Well, they were a little wary, and they tried to dissuade me. So they played, let's make a deal. You can either have one, a shiny new car, or two, you can be an exchange student. And I was like, no, I can always save up to buy a car. I want to be a foreign exchange student to Central America. Well, my parents agreed to me going abroad. However, the 1980s were a very dangerous time in Central America, and they were not comfortable with me going there. But since they had been to Italy, they were fine with me going to Europe. So they said, okay, you can do this, but it's got to be to Spain, to which I agreed. So on June 14th, 1984, I turned 17, and soon after, I was on a plane headed to Spain, my first time abroad. And I arrived in Spain. I'm from northeastern Ohio, and we arrive in the capital, Madrid. Very busy city. People dressed very differently than how we dressed in the U.S. Different smells, different sounds. And the accent in Spain is very different to the Latin American accents to which I had been exposed in my Spanish classes with special guests. So it was a bit overwhelming. The organization had a 2-day orientation in El Escorial, which is a city about an hour outside of Madrid. So we're doing all the activities, and we are staying in a dorm, and one of the housekeepers, nice young Spanish woman, asks me a question. I did not understand her. I asked her to repeat. Listened intently. I still did not understand her. And she must have repeated 3, 4, 5 times, and I just froze. My mind went blank, and I shut down. I just felt like a failure. I couldn't believe that I couldn't understand her, and it was just really a low moment. And I thought to myself, I should have picked the car. But it was too late. I was already there. So after the orientation was done, I was put on a bus with my luggage and a packed lunch, and I was heading to northwestern Spain. My host family lived in Galicia, which is the area to the north of Portugal. So it was a long bus ride, so I'm just trying to people watch, enjoy the beautiful scenery. It's mountainous, unlike Ohio. In Galicia, it rains every day during the year, so it's green and lush like Ireland. And, going through the mountains, bouncing along. And after a while, I was hungry, so I got my lunch out that the organization had packed for me. I take a bite of my sandwich, and without thinking, I open my drink, which was a soda can, which exploded all over me and all the people nearby me on the bus. Oh, were they all glaring at me? I wanted to crawl under my seat and disappear. I was so embarrassed, and I thought, they're just looking at me thinking, that dumb American. But made it through the rest of the bus ride, and when the bus got to the coast, there's nowhere else it could go, and waiting for me was the housekeeper, my host brother, and the youngest host sister, Pilka. So they took me back to their apartment, and the housekeeper and Pilka showed me the bedroom, the bed where I would sleep, the closet where I could put my clothes, and they asked me if I needed anything. And I didn't understand, and I thought, okay. I need a towel. So I'm like, I know how to say I need, necesito, and then I thought, towel. I didn't know how to say it. My mind went blank, and for some reason, the word thisne, which means swan, popped in my head, because I'd learned it in some poem that we studied. And I thought, why do I know how to say thisne, swan? Like, when am I going to use that in a conversation? But I don't know how to ask for a towel, which is such a basic, everyday, necessary word. I was so frustrated. But when they showed me where the bathroom was, there was a hand towel hanging. I kind of made a big square with my fingers, and then they understood and gave me a towel and said toalla. And I was like, oh, I could have almost guessed that one. So the next day, after a good night's sleep, get ready, and I want to go out and buy some postcards and stamps so I can write to my family. Remember, this is 1984. There's no internet, there's no email, text messages. You have to write the old-fashioned way. But I figured that one of my host siblings would go with me. No, they just told me where to go, and I thought, oh my God, I have to leave by myself. I was trembling. It took all my courage to work up the nerve to go down the steps of their flat, walk out into the little town, and go and buy the stamps and the postcards. And this is a little village, so people there know I'm not from there. They can tell by my permed 80s hair and my American way of dressing that I'm not from there, so you have everybody looking at you all the time. But I made it to the little shop, and I purchased my postcards and stamps, so okay, it was a little better. And then my youngest host sister, Pilka, and I, we figured, okay, we can maybe not have deep, profound conversations, but we'll walk the dog on the beach and we figured out that we could play Chinese checkers and card games that we both knew. And she always gently corrected my pronunciation. Then, a few days later, my oldest host sister, Nieves, came back from a trip. And she could drive, so she started taking me out with her friends. And I would sit at the table while they all talked, and I couldn't really understand much, but I just sat there and listened, minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, picking out little words. El, the, con, with, ella, she. And with time, I could kind of get a noun and a verb, and I could kind of get the gist of the conversation some of the time. So it was a little better. And Nieves always walked arm in arm with me, which always made me feel protected and safe. And then finally, my second oldest sister, Cristina, came back from the University of Pamplona, and then the fun really started. Cristina is very gentle, patient, and also too holding my hand, making sure that I felt that I was being taken care of. But that's when the adventure started. So I recently turned 17. We all know here you can't go out, but there in Spain, at that time, 16-year-olds could have beer and wine, and they were older than me, and we could do anything we wanted. So started going out all the time with their friends. We got home at 6 a.m. on a regular basis. Can you imagine somebody from Ohio never getting to do anything like that? We went to different beaches together. We went to the mountains. It's green and lush there. We took car trips all over Galicia. We went to see Celtic villages, centuries-old churches and cathedrals. We even saw Rudolf Nureyev, the Russian ballerina, dance. I mean, it was just incredible. And one day we met a Spanish musical group called Atuna, not like tuna fish, but it's called Atuna. And we ended up hanging out with them for the few days that they were in Galicia. And one night we had a bonfire and cooked some food. I have the mountains to one side, the ocean to the other, and these handsome young Spanish men dressed in black velvet suits with some silk touches, playing the guitar, the bandurria, Spanish instrument, and the lute. And they're singing, my host sisters and their friends are singing, and it was just a magical moment. It was like something out of a dream. And I thought at that moment, I love this place. I love these people and their culture, and I love their language. And that summer in northwestern Spain in 1984 changed my life forever and affected so many things, but specifically my academic life, because I knew then I want to study Spanish. It affected my professional life because I ended up becoming a professor of Spanish. And probably most especially, it affected my personal life because I met my husband that summer in 1984. But that's a whole other story for another time. Thank you.